Hi, welcome to another weekly session. And today's topic would be how to control the model training, how you can control your model training. And then we'll move ahead to understand what exactly is NASNets. And we'll conclude the discussion session with understanding what exactly is RScope, how to use it for your benefit, and what exactly it is. So, without any wasting time, let's get started and ensure that you do hit the subscribe button down there in the links. Uh, yeah, let's get started. So, model training is one part. So, model defining, model custom model defining is one part. But what if you want to control the flow of model training? What would you need to do to control the flow of model training? And to understand that, we would be discussing how to control and customize model.fit. And that is extremely similar to model subclassing. In model subclassing, you had init and call. Here we would be defining and working under train step or train on batch. These are the two different functions or the methods available for custom training. For custom training, these are the two methods. We'll be working on train step, but everything follows on the similar line. If you have to work on train batch, you can definitely check it out here. So let's get started. So this is what Keras, this is what TensorFlow documentation is about, and we'll be following it. What happens inside model.fit. I think you all are quite familiar with model.fit, what happens in model.fit, how to customize it to your need, but you don't have any customization options. But let's say you want to customize model.fit, how would you do it? So this is what they do. 3 steps: calculate the gradients, do a forward pass, calculate the gradients, and back propagate it. Right? While you back propagate it, you do the updates of the states. You do update of the states. So that's what we are about to do. Update the states, update the metrics. So the first example would be complicated because we'll be using what is already defined. We'll be getting into what exactly is model.fit, but we won't be actually customizing it to a great extent. So first example would be a bit complex, but once we start proceeding to a greater depth, we'll be able to understand what exactly is model.fit doing and how we can control the different parameters which are influencing or which are controlling the model training. So this is how it is done. Let's dive in. The initial part is extremely similar: custom model, TF Keras model. You will be getting data, right? The data needs to be unpacked into X and Y. Now, what happens is under the gradient tape, this is something we have already discussed in one of our weekly sessions wherein we will be learning how to do custom model training. That is something we might again take up in today's session, but this is actually a custom standard rule. If you have to do gradient descent, if you need to calculate gradients, this is what you need to do. Everything happens inside gradient tape. That is the golden rule. Now within the gradient tape, you would do a forward pass. After a forward pass, what would you expect to obtain? You should expect to obtain predictions. And based on the predictions, we calculate the ypred. This is extremely similar to what you do in PyTorch. You would get the data, and after getting the data, you would do outputs equal to model and inputs. After that, you would calculate loss. Here would you pass the loss function. Let's say loss function, and here would be targets, outputs. Then you would do loss dot backward, optimizer dot update, or whatever those things are. But we are not discussing PyTorch over here. We are discussing TF. Yeah, I mean, there is no point of discussing PyTorch. In PyTorch, you are actually doing everything from the very scratch. But TensorFlow also supports those kind of low-level features. And if you want to actually achieve those low-level features, this is how you can do. So here we would be obtaining ypred, pass the data, through the model, Once you do, calculate the loss by self dot compiled loss. You won't be able to understand these things because these are already defined, but just try to understand the flow of it, and once you understand the flow of it, things would be much easier. Just be in an acceptance mode to whatever is being delivered to you. So y pret, and then we have regularization losses. Here we pass self dot losses. You're done. Till now you did the forward pass, you calculated the losses. Now is the time for updates. For update, you need to first have the training variables. So this is different from this. Writing a training loop from scratch. This is what we did in one of our previous weekly sessions. This is what we try to do. Herein it is quite more intuitive. You do the model, pass the data, calculate the loss, do gradient tape, get the model.trainable weights, optimize the dot apply. I think this was one of the sessions. Very the first initial weekly sessions. Or it is better to search from here. The first session. Here in the first session, we did that. No, in the second session. In the weekly sessions 2. Weekly session 2, we did that. And yeah, this is what we did. And this is a notebook we tried to discuss, but this is entirely different. So what we are about to discuss is entirely different. So within a custom model, we are trying to customize within a custom model, or within a normal model also, we are trying to customize just a fit function. Even if you don't define a custom model, you can just try to customize the fit method. So that's what we are trying to do, get the trainable variables. So this is why this seems different, because in that you are actually doing in accordance to the flow. You're not changing the model.fit. Here we are changing the model.fit. So that's why it's different. Calculate the gradients. Gradients would be tape.gradient loss and the trainable variables. After you calculating the gradients, it's all about updating the weights, the metrics, and all the things. This is a simple example, and a simple feed forward pass through it is like this. So you can define anything. You can define anything. Let's say it's a 2-layer or 1-layer. Let's say it's a 1-layer. This is what happens, and your training is done, right? But let's get into more details, going more lower level. So in the more lower level, they try to compile, do different changes. First is try to have a different loss and a MAE metric, and that is how the compilation would happen. But let's before jumping into it, let's try to understand what happens over here. And let's print self.metrics. How does it change? And let's cut it over and paste it here so that I need not to keep swinging between the two cells continuously. So that's a bit troublesome. Yup. Now let's say you want to have a custom loss and a custom MAE metric. This is what you want to do. Paste it over here and just begin with this. So these are the changes. Get the loss, define a custom loss. Let's say I want mean and mean absolute error. That's what it is happening, mean and mean absolute error. These are the two metrics. So over here we'll have, other than this, what I'll do is calculate loss by calling df keras losses dot mean squared error, pass my y and y prediction. The metric which needs to be updated to track the loss would be loss tracker and MAE metric. Right? Yes, right. Would be loss tracker and MAE metrics. So rather than compile metrics update state, we will be doing the loss tracker update state and MAE metric update state. After doing that, rather than passing this, we will have to pass this. And beneath this, define a property function at the rate property def metrics self nothing but loss tracker and MAE metric. Nothing much, didn't do much customizations, but it's good enough. Where do I have keras? Now this is getting repetitive, so let's not keep on repeating the same thing over and over again, but let's get started with something you would love to understand. So let's write a training loop from a very scratch, and that's what this is about. How you can write a training loop from very scratch, and that is something which yields a more control rather than model.fit, in my personal opinion. And that is more intuitive, that is more understandable. So let's do that. So let's proceed to the second part of it, wherein we'll be doing more customizations rather than getting into the model subclassing and defining a separate call function, defining the separate fit method. So what we're gonna do is we'll define the training loop. The training loop will happen outside the model definition. So rather than calling model.fit, we would explicitly do the model training by passing the dataset in batches, and within a batch we'll do the optimization. So we'll do the forward pass, calculation of gradients, and the optimizer update. What happens inside the model training, that you'll start to realize what actually happens inside the model training, and this is extremely similar to what happens in PyTorch. So in PyTorch, never ever do model.fit. You do the training in a for loop. So that's what we are about to do. We are about to do a for loop in TensorFlow. So the architecture I've chosen is VGG16. What happened? And this is the model we have. Let's obtain a summary. We cannot as well. Good enough. VG16, flatten, dense, drop, dense, drop, dense. Good enough. So let's define the optimizer and the loss function. I'm not adding any metric value like accuracy, those kind of things, but we'll get onto them in the later part of the video. TensorFlow dot keras dot optimizers dot atom. Loss function should be equal to, let's say, tensorflow dot keras dot losses dot mean absolute error is good enough. So this is the article we might refer once in a while. Not mean absolute error. Why am I defining mean absolute error? It should be categorical cross entropy loss. Yes. This is a different example, but don't get to it. This on MNIST data we are doing on CIFAR 10. I've done the data processing part for you, so that is a bit redundant and you need not to waste time on that, absolutely. So let's proceed on to the main part of the main crux of the, or the main what you say, the main essence of the video. So that's what it is. Don't waste unnecessary time. So we are done with this. We find the optimizer and the loss function. So what happens inside training, you loop over a number of epochs. So let's say I want to train for 5 epochs. So you define that, okay, for 5 epochs you run a loop. Within each epoch you go through all the batches. So let's say this is a step which can be called as a batch step, and herein I have X batch train, Y batch train, in enumerate train data set. Good enough. Within this, what happens, you do the gradient tape. Gradient tape is needed for calculating gradient or automated differentiation. So with df dot gradient tape as tape, what you're gonna do is 2 things. First, obtain the predictions. Second, obtain the loss value. To obtain the predictions, you'll call the model, pass in the data, which is X batch train, and set training equal to true. Loss would be loss function, wherein you pass the y true, which is y batch train, and the predictions. Once you are done with forward pass and calculating the losses, you need to calculate gradients. You would calculate gradients by using tape dot gradient and differentiating the loss value with respect to model trainable weights, trainable variables. Update the weight based on the gradient, run 1 step of gradient descent. Yes, I also am interested in the progress. So for every 10th step, I want to know what's the present loss. So let's say it is step loss. So let's run it. So there's no need to do model compile, those kind of things. You're simply actually in entire control of model compile. Is not there in PyTorch, neither is model fit. So you shouldn't expect this to be here. You're actually controlling the entire flow of how the things would happen. And that's the beauty of it. Yeah. What happened? I think we ran into an error. Too many variables. Okay, 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 okay. Yep. So you can see your model training happening. Now let's do some changes. What we're going to do is we can add some metrics. Adding metrics. Let's say I also want to know what the training accuracy is and what the validation accuracy is. So I can add training accuracy parameter and validation accuracy parameter. Within training accuracy, what I'm going to do is df keras layer metrics. Categorical accuracy. Same would be the case for validation accuracy. So till now I have not touched the validation data. Now I will start touching upon the validation data, what actually validation data is. And yeah, this part is for training. So here the begins. Here what we say is training begins. Beneath this, what I want to say is validation. So what happens within validation is quite simple. Let's not complicate it this much. We'll go in a progressive manner. The examples are a bit complicated and inundating, or rather intimidating to understand at the very first go, that I really don't want to happen to you if you're just starting out with this. So I'm not with the aim of replicating this, whatever is right in front of you, to what I'm doing. Targeted to understand the things from the very core and being able to utilize it in your own workflows, right? If you ever feel the need, so you would be able to customize and replicate in your use case, your way, or whatever you want to do. So whatever it is, so on a very similar line, what we're gonna do is, this was for training data set. So within one epoch, this particular loop was for training data set, right? This particular loop was for training data set. Now let's say you went for the entire epoch. After going through, this was one completion of one epoch. Once you start from the for loop, you complete the for loop, you're completed with the one epoch. Now let's proceed to the validation part. For step, comma, x batch val, comma, y batch val in enumerate val dataset, wherein what we're going to do is again tf. I don't think either we actually need gradient tape because we won't be doing any differentiation. So what we're going to do is obtain the predictions, wherein we will pass the data and we'll set the training equal to false, get the loss value with the help of loss function, and pass in the data as y patch validation and the actual value, which was predictions. If after you are done, so what you're going to do is print. I'm doing this outside the validation loop, so I don't actually want to know what was happening in the intermediate steps. I don't want to know the, rather actually you can remove this as well. So what you can do is get is outside the training loop and you will get to know ultimate training loss. So what you can do is shift this, rather than step losses, training loss equals to whatever the loss is. Okay, So similarly, what you're going to do is validation loss is this. Now, yep, let's start. I think we won't be able to reach this because the data set is huge. So what I can do is shift this to the GPU mode. Okay, this is in GPU mode. Are we still not done with one epoch? That's very strange. How do you add the TQDM over enumerate? TQDM over enumerate. Enumerate TQDM, right? Good enough. That's pretty impressive. So let's make it a bit more similar to what we see in our regular training. TQDM import TQDM. Now this is what makes it better and interesting than the traditional ones. So that's the beauty of it. You can customize and make the things better, and customize and make the things, carve out the things that suit your use case, your application, your whatever you want to achieve. So that's the beauty and understanding of this particular topic. We have not still utilized metrics. We'll now utilize metrics. So I just reran this. Note that we are not starting from scratch this time. It is like calling model.fit multiple times. So calling model.fit multiple times does not make the model retrain itself from the scratch. Rather, it continues from where it was trained. So we have not done any model.confine or reinitiated any of the optimizers or the models. So it is resuming from where we left it from. We should have increased the batch size. Let it be almost there. So let's say if we are about to add the metrics, so what I'll do is we'll have to add training metrics which we had it. So this is what it would be. Two things we gotta do. First is training metric, the value. So what it does is keeps the value. It's a dictionary, it keeps the value. So update the metric value. at the for each epoch, while within each batch keep updating the values of training metric. After the end of epoch, get the value, print out the value, reset the values. That's what it's going to be. So this is one batch. Within each batch, training accuracy dot update state. For update state to happen, what you're going to do is you're going to need the, how you're going to calculate the training accuracy. Where you will need the y values, the actual values, y batch train, and the prediction values, logits or the predictions, whatever it is. We have used predictions, they have used logits. Outside the for loop or end of for loop, you will define the training loss. We'll also print out the training accuracy as train accuracy dot result, and after that you gotta reset these states. So your two metrics, first three methods. First is update state, get the results, reset states. So on a similar note, what we're gonna do is validation accuracy within each batch. Validation accuracy goes through an update state wherein you're gonna pass the y batch validation and the predictions. After the end of epoch, you can print the validation accuracy as val accuracy dot result. After you're done, you can print the, oh no, you need not to print, you need to reset the states. Good enough. So this time, this would be with the help of metrics. Let's redefine everything from the very start. Now this is something which is quite interesting. Using TF function, what actually happening over here is eager execution. If you want to have a graph method, since everything is well defined, fixed, we can do a graph execution, which would speed up your model training, custom model training, which is something like taking this part of the training and making a function out of it, right? So that's beneficial in the long run. So what happens is that helps in you in, that would help you in debugging, as well as that would help you in understanding the code better, in a better manner. Added to it, there's the speed advantage as the execution takes place in the graph mode rather than execution eager mode. So let's say it's my train step, and I'll require another one where I'll do the validation step. So these are the two things which are needed. First thing is train step, second is validation step. Within the first, what I need is x and y. So is the case with validation step. I need x and y. What did we do in train step? We did gradient calculation, TF gradient tape as tape, TF gradient tape as tape, and the first step would be equal to the obtaining of predictions, which would be model x comma training equals to false, training equals to true, and thereby we calculate the loss value by loss function, wherein I pass the y value and the predictions. After calculating the loss, the case is for understanding what is the gradients, calculate gradients, calculate the update the optimizer, do the backprop, and update the training accuracy dot update state. Good enough? This can return, so at present this particular code is returning the loss value, and yeah, that's what you can do. You can also return the loss value. Here we do not need any gradient tape, simply the predictions validation would do the work for us. Training equal to false, loss would be equal to loss function y predictions return the loss val. Now let's do it again. Epochs equals to 5 for epoch in range epochs. What we have is train loss would be equal to train step, wherein I pass the data. So within each epoch I have patches. A training step happens and a validation step happens inside a validation loop. Good enough. After the completion of one epoch for training, what we're going to do is update the training accuracy dot update state. We're going to update the state. Oh, we did the update step over here, and I did forget to do the validation accuracy update state over here. Y, and we have predictions validation. Good enough. Now what we do is get the result and print it out as training accuracy and it feels quite fun if you are implementing on your own, right? It would be actually fun to do it from the scratch. It would give you so much of control. And if you want to do optimizations to your code, or if you want to obtain custom results, custom output, this is the best way to proceed. Yeah, so where was I? Yeah, this, then train accuracy, reset states. Same is the case with validation accuracy. And I think this is good enough. Now the code is way more condensed and we'll be better able to proceed. Just don't mind the training, just mind the process. We are not building models, we are trying to understand what is actually training accuracy and how the custom training happens. So good enough, so far so good. Let's reinitiate all the metrics, and now we are doing the ultimate wrap up. We'll be defining TF function in a way more low level code, but this is a better and the best way to deal. But the best part is, this is no more different from what you do in PyTorch. Yeah, the syntax and the formulations are a bit different, but things are pretty interesting. And so these things are should not be at all done if you're just starting out with TensorFlow. This would actually demotivate you to do the things, because there are plenty of things you need to learn and understand. So these are the things which actually come in the optimization part. If you're trying to build something custom or you want to obtain custom outputs, you're defining a new strategy. So that's where these things come into role. High tech, high level research, or some things like those. So these are not the things that you should be doing at the very start of your career in the data science. So not at all. I would not at all ask you to learn these things. If you are just starting out with a career in data science, please don't be worried if you didn't understand it. But have a look. Take a look. If you don't understand it, not an issue. Go through it again. Through it 6 months later. Go through it after a year. Understanding would be better. Go through it after 2 years. Understanding would be way better. So these are the things that come gradually, and with the passage of time, once you understand, okay, what actually is model.fit, you're fitting the model, what actually is gradient descent, your first time understanding of gradient descent and your 10th time understanding of gradient descent, there would be a gulf of difference. So the things start getting clearer and you will be able to understand the things to a much greater depth. And what happened here? Oh boy, what happened here? Mm-hmm. Now let's reset. So reset was not successful. We skipped over something. Resetting the data, resetting the model, resetting the metrics, resetting the functions. So yeah, where was I? I was talking about the different things there are in data science. There's a lot many things to learn in data science. Go through architectures first, go through the architectural design. You'll have a better understanding. Try to build custom models, try how the things happen. So data science is a continuous process, not like a curriculum, fixed curriculum. You can take part, you can pick up a topic from a very advanced thing, and you might even understand it better than the things you're actually dealing with. And that's no thing, that's nothing strange. And it's always better to be an implementation guy first, then understand the theory. Or what I actually prefer is go through implementation, partially understand it, go back to the theory, implementation theory, and that's the best way to learn data science in the it's the most lucrative way. So you are actually understanding what is happening in the implementation. So what's there in the theory, what's in the implementation, you have a better understanding, better you have a better takeaway. So there are things you understand, you take away from it. So what you actually take away is the things you actually implement. So if you are understanding, I think once you go through this video, I can definitely bet on the fact that nothing could better make you understand what happens inside the training loop rather than this. So you must have read that, okay, for every epochs you have batches, within one batch you do updates, but here you're actually doing the updates. So how do you, what is the better way to understand this rather than this? So validation step completed, but we are getting an error which might be the cause of why am I getting the validation error. Let's just skip it out. So can you do this in the model training? Can you skip out the entire training part and just obtain the validation? So this is quite interesting. What is happening? I do not get it. Okay, I passed the loss function, which shouldn't have been done because loss function is meant for this particular thing, the training part. We're not calculating the validation loss. But if I want to calculate the validation loss, how would I do? I think I would require a separate loss function for validation as well. The way I did in training, so I didn't have a common training accuracy, rather I had two training accuracy, training and validation accuracy. Similar, I need to have true validation accuracies. Yes, that was the error. Now we can re-begin. We start. Where was I? Yeah. So let's define a validation loss as well. Validation loss function equals to tf keras losses dot categorical cross entropy loss, and this would be fun to implement. The reason being, alright, let's see how it goes. We're almost done with this. Come on. The faster it gets done, the better we are. So the first epoch for training is completed. We are heading forward to the calculation of training accuracy. Come on, don't get stuck over there. Oh boy. Come on, what happened? I think it literally got frozen over here. Let's restart everything. This is damn frustrating sometimes. But nevertheless, you gotta deal with this. Let's hope it gets done this time so that I can end the video over here. Oh boy, come on. So let's just remove the lost thing from here. Yeah, just remove the lost thing. It doesn't return anything. What you get is simply the validation step. You do the validation step and you get the metric. No, 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 no. That's how it would be. Or rather, just skip over the training. I don't want the training to happen. Just give me the validation results. Is it happening or is it not happening? Yes, it is happening. Alright, good enough. Now let's figure out how to get the validation loss in training accuracy. Custom training loop validation loss. I think they are using the same loss function for validation as well, but it was throwing error at my time. I don't know why is it so. Loss, loss, loss. For the validation part, we saw different things. But why didn't I get the validation loss? I want to have validation loss as well. But you don't define two different loss functions, do you? So why shouldn't it work for this as well? It should work. Validation loss should be equal to loss function y comma predictions, return the validation loss. (16, 10, 32, 10 are incompatible. So I think what we can do is print y dot shape print breadth dot shape. So next time it goes for 16 comma 10. First time, well, in the beginning of the loop it is 32 32, then it becomes 16 comma 10. What? This is strange, but let's devote some more time. Y shape, breadth shape, good enough. At the end of the epoch, Y shape becomes 16 comma 10. Okay, here should be predictions val, that should go in the loss function, and here should be predictions val dot shape, and now we no longer would be having any error. That was such a small addition that made the difference. Yeah. Yup. Good enough. So let's remove all this bogus things for debugging, and let's get the training once more running with the validation loss. So what we're doing is we'll print, we'll juxtapose loss value as well, which would be and inside this here you print the train loss. Similar thing should happen over here. I can print the loss. For the validation. Just hope it gets successfully done so that I can wrap up the session. I've been wanting to wrap up the section for a very long time, but let's get it done. What you can do added to this, you can make a pandas data frame, store the values over there, do anything you want to do. You have entire control over here. So let's say if there's anything, if step number is this, then only display this. So you can add additional conditions, like if epoch number is divisible by 10, then only you gotta display the output. So multiple controls you can have. That's the beauty of it, and we are successfully done with this. Let's wrap up the session over here. Ensure that you do hit the subscribe button. This does deserve a subscribe button. Ensure that do hit the subscribe button down there in the links. So let's start with our next topic, that is NASNet architecture. NASNet architecture was designed by Google Brain, and this is one of the least talked about architecture, but one of the most interesting architectures. So why not discuss it in bit more detail, in bit more elaborate method, in a bit more elaborate method. So that's what it is: neural architecture search for cells. So what it actually does is based on reinforcement learning. So it tries to understand. It tries to find the architecture on its own. So rather than people are building architecture, with the help of reinforcement learning, architecture is developed, and that's how the best architecture was proposed. That was in CVPR 2018. Now back in 2018, so this what is the fundamental idea of it. So what it does is searches for an architectural building block on a small dataset, then transfers the block to a larger dataset. This is what it does, and achieves state-of-the-art results for 2018 CVPR. This. Three variants we have: A, B, C. So what it does is the overall architecture is predefined as follows: blocks or cells are not predefined by authors; they are searched by reinforcement learning, which is what I said in the beginning. Two kinds of cell: normal cell, reduction cell, convolutional cells that return a feature map of the same dimension, reduction cell, convolution cells that return a feature map where the feature map height and width is reduced by a factor of 2. Controller model architecture. So this is the controller model architecture. This keeps on repeating. This is what it is. So controller model architecture, RNN, recursively predicts the rest of the structure of the convolution cell with the two initial hidden states. Select a hidden state from HI and HI minus 1 or from a set of hidden states created in the previous blocks. Select the second hidden state from the same options in step 1. Select an operation to apply to the hidden state selected in step 1. Select an operation to apply to the hidden state selected in step 2. Select a method to combine the outputs of step 3 and 4 to the new hidden state. This is a set of operations to be applied. So result of this search process is over 4 days yields a several candidate convolution with the help of 500 GPUs, resulting in 2000 GPU hours. So which is effectively running GPUs for 83 continuous days. But yeah, that's why. But if you were to use a single GPU, but you are using 500 GPUs and reducing the number of days. Finally, NASNet A, NASNet B, and NASNet C normal reduction cells were formed. So this is the ultimate architecture. This is the NASNet A, NASNet normal cell reduction cell, normal cell reduction cell, normal cell reduction cell. Experimental results: scheduled drop path, CIFAR 10, ImageNet result, MS Cooper results. Good enough. So let's go to the official paper and let's see what it tries to discuss and explain. So let's go through the extract first. Developing neural architecture classification models often requires significant architectural engineering. This paper we study method to learn the model architectures directly on the dataset of interest. As this approach is expensive and the dataset is large, we propose a search for an architectural building block on a small dataset and then transfer the block to a larger dataset. The key contribution of this work is the design of a new search space, which is NASNet search space, which enables transferability. In our experiments, we search for the best convolution layer on the CIFAR 10 dataset and then apply this cell to the ImageNet dataset by stacking together more copies of this cell, each with their own parameters, to design a convolution architecture which we name NASNet architecture. We also introduce a new regulation technique called scheduled drop path that significantly improves generalization in NASNet models. On CIFAR 10 itself, this was our achievement, and on ImageNet, this was our achievement. Our model is this much better and has this many fewer flops, a reduction of 28% computational demand. For instance, a smaller version of NASNet achieves 24% top 1 accuracy, which is 3.1% equivalently sized. On the task of this, faster RCN surpass this, alright. So let's talk about the method. We'll read about the method thing and experiment results we know. So let's talk about the conclusion first. So conclusion is, in this work we demonstrate how to learn scalable architectures that transfer to multiple image classification tasks, and the learned architecture is quite flexible as it may be scaled in terms of computational cost. and the parameters to easily address a variety of problems. In all cases, the accuracy of the resulting model exceeds all the human design models, ranging from models designed for mobile applications to computationally heavy models designed to achieve the topmost accurate results. The key insight in our approach is to design a search space that decouples the complexity of an architecture from the depth of a network. This resulting search space permits identifying good architectures on a small dataset and transferring the learned architecture to image classifications across a range of data and computational scales. This is quite repetitive of what we did in the abstract, but nevertheless, let's talk about the method. I think method would be interesting to learn and read. So our work uses search methods to find a good convolution architecture. This is the architecture. We use a controller recurrent neural network that samples child networks with the different architectures, and the child networks are trained to converge to obtain some accuracy on a held out validation space. The resulting accuracies are used to update the controller so that the controller will generate better accuracies over the time, and the controller weights are updated with the policy gradient. Controller RNN sample architecture A with probability P, train a child network with A to get the convergence, and then scale up, scale up, scale up. Yeah, that's what it is. The main contribution of this work is to design the novel search space, and so that the best architecture is found. Then we move on to different image classification tasks and scale up in accordance with how big the data set is, and that's how it is done. So the observation suggests that it may be possible for the controller RNN to predict a generic convolutional cell expressed in terms of these motifs. This is in our approach. Overall architectures of the convolution nets are manually predetermined. They are composed of convolution cells repeated many times, where each convolution cell has the same architecture but different weights. To easily build scalable architectures for any size, we need two kind of convolution cells. That's what we discussed in the beginning. Two fundamental cells. One is the convolution cell for the same dimension that return the feature map of the same dimension, convolution cells that return the feature map, where the feature map height and width is reduced by a factor of 2. We name the first cell as normal cell, other as a reduction cell. As the name suggests, reduction is meant for reducing. For the reduction cell, we make the initial operation applied to the cell's input have a slide of 2 to reduce the height and width. For all our operations that we consider for building our convolution cells, we have an option of sliding. This is what it is. Figure 2 shows our placement of normal and reduction for cells CIFAR10 and ImageNet. Note on ImageNet, we have more reduction cells since the incoming image is 299 compared to 32 cross 32. The reduction and normal cell could have the same architecture, but we empirically found it would be beneficial to learn two separate architectures. So we use a common heuristic to double the number of filters in the output whenever the spatial activation size is reduced in order to roughly constant hidden state dimension. This what varies in the convolution nets is a structure of the normal and reduction cells which are searched by the controller RNN. The structures of RNN of the cells can be searched within a search space as defined as follows. In our search space, each cell receives as input two hidden states, hi and hi-1, which are the outputs of the two cells. This is actually what is actually happened, and then we collected for the operations. So this is what actually the architecture came out to be. And then step 5, the controller RNN selects the method to combine this. So this is very an atypical method and convention of doing things. So what it does is, first it starts on a novel search space. So you have a controller RNN. RNN tries to predict the next layers. When you try to predict the next layer, it trains on the architecture, tries to achieve convergence on a smaller data set. Then if you have to scale up, it scales up in accordance. Right? That's the first part. That's a very fundamental part. Now the building of the scalable architectures of any size, we need two types of functions. First is the normal cell and other is the reduction cell. For CIFAR10, this is the architecture. For ImageNet, where the size of the images shoot up, this is the architecture, right? And within the normal cell, could have the same architecture, but we empirically found it would be beneficial to learn different architectures. Absolutely perfect. And importantly, much like inception resonant network, we would consider the number of motif repetitions and number of initial convolution as free parameters that we tailor to the scale of the right. Now what varies in the convolution net of the structures is this. So the convolution RNN tries to recursively predict what would be the convolution layer after this, and then the predictions are, let's say, there are 5-step process of predicting. First, select a hidden state from hi to hi minus 1, and from this set of hidden states created in the previous block. Select a hidden state from the same options in the step 1. Select an operation to apply to the hidden state. Select an operation to apply in the step 2. Select a method to combine these two. Algorithm appends newly created hidden state to existing. This is how it happens. In step 3 and 4, the controller selects an operation. We collected the following set of operations based on the prevalence of CNN literature. In step 5, the controller selects a method to combine two hidden states, element-wise or concatenation. Finally, all the unused hidden states generated in the convolution cell are concatenated together in depth to provide the final cell output. To allow controller RNN to predict both normal cell and reduction cell, we simply take controller to have 2 into p predictions in total, where the first 5p predictions for the normal cell and second 5p predictions are for the reduction cell. In random search, instead of sampling the decisions from the softmax classifiers in the controller, in our experiments, we find that random search is slightly worse than reinforcement learning on the CIFAR-10. Although there is value in reinforcement learning, the gap is smaller. NASNet search space is well constructed such that this. So this is what it is. Basically, we are able to understand what exactly is this controller model architecture for recursively constructing the one block of convolutional cell. Each block requires selecting 5 discrete parameters, each of which corresponds to the output of a softmax layer. So that's the main idea. I think you got the main idea. You have basically a controller RNN which keeps on predicting the next layers, and this is what the controller model architecture looks like. For recursively constructing one block of a convolutional cell, each block requires 5. This is for defined for one block of, and for each block requires 5, selecting 5 discrete parameters, each of which corresponds to the output of a softmax layer. Example constructed block shown on right. A convolutional cell contains 5 blocks, contains p blocks, hence the controller contains 5p softmax layers for predicting the architecture of convolution cell. In our experience, number of blocks of p is 5. Alright. There's an interesting class of architecture. So you're not actually trying to build the architecture or doing anything. Is actually you're building an architecture using RNNs. You're using reinforcement learning, then using reinforcement learning you find an architecture, then you're defining the next architecture using the present hidden state, using the hidden state of this one and the previous hidden state, current hidden state and the previous hidden state. You are defining the next 2 hidden states, and that's how you end up with an architecture. That's one of the best architectures. So that's an interesting approach and a unique kind of approach. One of the most unique architectures of what we have ever discussed. So yeah, that's interesting, and it was able to outperform almost majority of the data sets in terms of flops as well as the computation time and the performance. Absolutely, first you need to first and foremost parameters to outperform in terms of performance, and even if some models are good in performance, those are not at par in terms of the computational cost. So this model was actually able to achieve a lesser computational cost with a greater accuracy, and that's one of the best achievements. And that's pretty unique. The approach taken for this particular architectural design is absolutely unique in itself, given the fact that it utilizes reinforcement learning, and you utilize reinforcement learning amalgamated with RNN and try to predict the next layer. Doing that, you build up one of the best architectures. So this is pretty amazing. So let's move on to our next topic, that is understanding arc scope. What actually arc scope is. So let's move on to our next topic. Till then, ensure that you must have hit the subscribe button. If not, that's over there. Do hit the subscribe button. So let's start with understanding what is R scope. R scope is something we keep on seeing quite often, but actually what exactly is, so this is what I want to discuss in this particular video, this part of the video, and this is what we are about to discuss. R scope is a way to avoid repeating providing the same arguments over and over again to the same layer type, but actually how to use it and what exactly it is. So let's dive into it. Let's explore what exactly is R scope. So when defining the convolution layers, you may always use the same padding type and same initializer, and may even use the same convolution size. So for pooling, you may also use the same 2x2 pooling size and so on. So there are many factors which keep on repeating, right? So what does this talk about? Let's say R scope is a way to avoid repeating the same arguments over and over again. So this is the ways that source documentation this points to, but this is no more active. The link is no more active, or is it active? Or it is active. Let it be. So the example of how to use TensorFlow contribution framework R scope. Third party TensorFlow, this is this. So if it is a layer convolution 2-dimensional, padding would be same, initializer would be this, and the regularizer would be this. So whenever you use this TensorFlow layers convolution 2D, you pass in the inputs, pass in the number of filters, pass in the kernel size, pass in the stride, padding if has to be changed then mention, else needs not to be mentioned. The first call to would behave as follows. Okay, so here the first call to convolution 2-dimensional if expanded would be this, where the initializer gets filled by this particular value and the regularizer would be this particular value, and scope will be convolution 1. If for the second call we have skipped over a lot of arguments, whereas just the number of filters and the kernel size is mentioned. So where there you have 256 kernel size, padding as same as mentioned over here, and you have the initializer, you have the regularizer. This reduces mentioning the key factors, key repeaters again and again, right? So this actually used a lot for people who are trying to develop their own architecture for research works. That's what it is, TensorFlow content framework. But let's read a few more articles. Not exactly articles, but these Stack Overflow threads are also quite informative. You get to learn a lot of things in a very short and brief, condensed manner. That's the benefit of it. And here, so what does this talk about? This says I'm rewriting this. Yeah, so there isn't any other mechanism that lets you define default values in code TensorFlow, so you should specify the arguments for each layer. For instance, this code slim.rscope, slim.fully connected activation this would become tf.keras.layers this. Oh, I didn't understand this one particularly. So exactly what does this say? I'm rewriting this particular inception v3. So this particular guy is trying to write inception v3 using tf layers. Unfortunately, the new tf layers model does not work with R scope, so it does not have the necessary decorators. Is there any better mechanism in place that I should use to set default parameters for layers, or should I simply add proper arguments to each layer and remove the R scope? Here's an example that uses R scope, variable scope. This is what it's trying to do. There isn't another mechanism that lets you define default values in TensorFlow, so you should specify the arguments for each layer. For instance, this code slim.rscope, slim.fully connected activation is this, weights is this, normal initializer and weights of regularizer is this. There isn't any other mechanism, another mechanism lets you define the values in core TensorFlow. So you should specify the arguments for each layer. So let's say you are talking about fully connected of Slim. So what we want to do is activation would be this. These are the TensorFlow values, all right. So what were these over here? Okay, either you can use slim.rscope. This is how it would be. Then that would eventually become this core TensorFlow type. Else, what you want to do is you can use TF variable scope. That's also the same. Make sure you read the documentation of the layer to see which layers. Alright, what's the scope of variable argument variables in Python? I think this is different. This is a bit different. I think we did understand to a certain extent, but we would love to expand upon this. So why TensorFlow contrib framework RScope not applicable to TF Keras layers? So I'm trying to move from TF contrib slim to TF Keras packages. I feel comfortable with RScope syntax because it reduces many redundant arguments. So however, for Keras layers it's not applicable and it is the following error, right? Alright, so what is it? No answer. I think that's what it is. That's what it is. Here we have another answer. This is you can use add RScope from contrib library, which adds the necessary decorators and makes the function usable with RScope. Create a wrapper around TF Keras required layer and decorate it with add RScope. Okay, this is one way. This is a hack around it. So what you're gonna do is, if you want to use convolution 2 dimensions, that's what you can do. Use convolution 2 dimensional and decorate it with add RScope. So that way you will be able to use add RScope over here. So within RScope you're able to use convolution 2 dimensional, and that's the benefit. So that's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. And good enough. Good enough. So we can wrap up this topic over here. Rather, we can wrap up this topic over here. I think that's what exactly this is, RScope. Personally, I've never ever used it, but would love to explore more about it. The better I get to know about it, the more I'll inform you. Till then, stay updated. Try to add in if you have some inputs to add. Please add that in the comment section. I will be happy to check it out. And yeah. Alright, I hope this was an enjoyable session. You hoped a lot. And if you have any topic to add, if you have any suggestion to suggest, please do that in the comment section. Till then, let's sign off. Take care. Bye bye. And do ensure that you hit the subscribe button. I repeat it again and again, but I have 78% of my viewers as non-subscribers, aiding the rest 22% are subscribers. So ensure that you do hit the subscribe button down there. Yeah, down there. And all right, let's sign off. Take care. Bye bye.